Shalom friends, thank you for joining me and viewing this video, a series of videos on Pirkei Avot. As you all know, we've started a couple of weeks ago after Pesach to recite and learn the Pirkei Avot during the weeks following Pesach leading up to the holiday of Shavuot. Today, and like the rest of the classes that you'll join me, we'll be dealing with a specific Mishnah, necessarily the entire Mishnah, but a part of the Mishnah where we could try to deepen our knowledge and our understanding of the eternal teachings of our sages from the time of the Talmud. In the first chapter, in Mishnah number 6, Mishnah Vav, we discover a great Chacham, a great sage by the name of Yeshua ben Prachya. Yeshua ben Prachya was a leading figure amongst the Jewish sages right around the time of the Second Temple, and he was part of a whole lineage of rabbis and transmission of the Torah. He was part of the pairs, what we call in the Mishnah, the pairs were two sages, classically known as the Nasi, kind of like the president, and the Av Bedin, the chief of the Bedin. So he is mentioned here in the 6th Mishnah, where it says, Yeshua ben Prachya venitaya arbeli kiblu mehem. Yeshua ben Prachya was the Nasi, the president, Evnitaya Arbali was the Av Bedin. Yeshua ben Prachya Omer, says the Mishnah, Aseh lecha rav ukne lecha chaver. Yeshua ben Prachya says, appoint a teacher for yourself and acquire a friend. I would like to take a moment and to learn with you the part that discuss about appointing a teacher for yourself. Rashi, one of the classic commentators on the Talmud, including the Mishnah and other works, views the function of the teacher as an insurance, kind of ensuring the intellectual honesty of the students and conveying the authentic tradition. Meaning that according to Rashi, having a teacher ensures the student that he will not make mistakes in his understanding, contrary to learning something from a book, as we'll see as a very famous proverb from one of the sages that says you can learn what to say from a book, but from a rabbi you learn what not to say. So, meaning Rashi understand this importance adage of Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachya to tell us as an insurance that a person can learn many things from books, but to actually ensure that the student itself or the person learning will receive and understand properly the message that's conveyed to him, one has to appoint himself a teacher. It's interesting. I want to take you back a little bit, the beginning of this chapter, the first Mishnah. It says something along the lines, well, actually it says precisely, ve'emidu talmidim arbe, and establish, the word imidu meaning establish, something that is founded, something that is proper, that is standing on its own feet, which is a very interesting word to use when explaining on how one has to establish many students. The simple way of explaining this, the Mishnah should have used a more appropriate word, saying, teach a lot of students, convey your message, have a lot of students around you. Why does it use the word amidu talmidim arbe? Amidu, it comes from the word omed, something that is standing, something that is like a structure, something that is like a pillar standing on his own 2 feet. And this is really connected to this teaching of Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachya that says, "Ha'amidu talmidim arbe," is telling us that it's not sufficient just to teach to the students, but one also has to make sure that they're standing on their own 2 feet, like a pillar, emidu, that they should be established. And how do you know if a student is well standing on his feet when he himself can deduct and deduce on his own, with his own intellectual capacity, he can deduce and teach to others. And therefore the Mishnah is telling us here, Aselech Harav, the importance of making a Rav is also leading us back to the idea that the Rav itself, or Rabbi himself, will ensure that his students are well grounded and that they become pillars themselves. Let's continue a little bit about some other ideas that we find in the Tiferet Israel. The Tiferet Israel sees here in these words a charge that every city and congregation should engage a rabbi who will act as a spiritual mentor. So meaning that according to the Tiferet Israel, the teaching here of Yeshua ben Prachya is a charge to a community to ensure that they have a rabbi that is leading them spiritually. There's a very interesting story about a rabbi called that wrote a book, Bet HaLevi, and in this book there's profound teaching in Jewish law and thinking and Talmudis. And this rabbi was offered a job, a prestigious rabbinic position in one of the cities that was already, the seat was vacant for almost 14 years. When he received the proposal of this prestigious position, he immediately refused. When asked why he refused such a prestigious position, Rabbi said, "Look, I'll answer you with an anecdote, a parable. When a woman loses her husband, apart from the fact that it's terrible for her and she grieves and she mourns him, she also asks herself about practical things. Who's going to do kiddush for her? Who's going to do havdalah? Who is going to assist her on all of the things that usually her husband does? Reciting the kiddush Friday night, doing the havdalah, and so forth. Who's going to do all this?" And as time goes by, she realizes that she could do without him. She becomes independent. She doesn't really need him, and she could do the kiddush herself, and she could do the havdalah herself, and she, after a while, realizes very fast that she can manage on her own. So he says this is the same thing with this community. A community that haven't had a rabbi in position for 14 years have already established certain things, and they are set in their ways, and to adjust to the new position of the rabbi could be very challenging for them and for the rabbi, and that's why I refused the position. There's a lot of depth into this story. Now, let's go a bit further, apart from the assurance of a rabbi and making sure that the actual data is transmitted properly, and that there should be intellectual honesty, as we said, or whether it's a charge for a community. The Rambam has a very interesting position on the way he understands his Mishnah. The Rambam sees this Mishnah as follows. He says, appoint a teacher for yourself, even if he is equal or inferior to you intellectually, appoint him as your teacher, says the Rambam. Why is so? How can one appoint someone that is equally to him intellectually or even more inferior to him? How does he become his teacher? The Rambam answers, because studying with another person is much more efficient than studying alone. The Rambam says, and continues and says, the exchange of ideas yields great clarity. So here we see something that is quite astonishing, and the importance of the exchange between two people, that to the point that when one exchanges with another person, he will definitely learn something that he himself would not be able to attain on his own. Learning on your own could maybe bring you to a certain level of learning, but you can only see things the way you understand them. Every person understands certain things the way his brain works, the way his level of intellectual capacities. But when you exchange with someone else, as we see in the Talmud, and we see that in Jewish culture, exchanging and debating was always a heritage that we've acquired from generation to generation, as you see in the Talmud itself. Great exchanges and great debates with great sage by and with great sages. And so the exchange itself, even though someone could be inferior intellectually than you, the actual exchange will bring you to a knowledge and to deepen and to hear different ideas that you would have not have thought on your own. So with these three approaches that we see from the different commentaries of this Mishnah, or this part of the Mishnah from the teaching of Yeshua ben Prachya, we learn three things. We learn, first of all, the importance of having a mentor, the importance of having a rabbi that could guide us, that we ensure that we go in the right path, or that we ensure that what we learn or the knowledge that we want to acquire is authentic and is part and that is part of our tradition. Second of all, we see the value of communication and exchange, and how much it could bring to a person to understand on a higher level, even if someone is inferior, even if the exchange is done with someone that is more inferior intellectually. So the importance and value of the exchange, and finally, the humility that one must display when learning and teaching. As we just mentioned, that when you exchange with someone that is at least equal to you, or inferior, or even inferior than you must have great humility and be able to open to learn with someone that is maybe on an inferior level than you. And that takes humility. So the humility on part of the teacher, and the humility on part of the one that's receiving, which is the student.